Hello, everybody. It is J. Allen Winchester. I am going to attempt to make a video based off of a script. One of my resolutions I made for myself this year is I want to try to make more content that is book focused. Um, hmm, Yeah. So one of the issues I was facing previously when I was trying to make stuff about my books is that oftentimes my research material, because I do an awful lot of research and world building and development and things like that, some of my research material crosses into other stories. So I would sometimes rabbit hole and then I would end up talking about different stories. And so I was like, well, why don't I just try talking about my source material? And then those videos were just too long and I couldn't find a means to crop them down. And I'm just, yeah. So I'm going to try to make something more focused today. Um, so one of the things that I want to say it right out the gate is that when I was talking with Mrs. Winchester about publishing my first book, we had discussed which one of my Triad sagas was going to be one of them. The Triad sagas having the most development, I figured that they would be the best candidates, right? Now, the story that we both agreed would be the best to adapt would be Nature Calls. One, because it is Mrs. Winchester's favorite story I've ever written. Two, it was probably the most progressed as far as manuscripts, drafts of everything I had at the time, I guess. Then the other reason being on Inkit, when I was writing it on Inkit, it had a lot of diverse input. I had teenagers loving it. I had adults, college level, people my mother's age were all loving this book, which really encapsulated my desire for general audience appeal. But also, as I've probably seen in some of my posts other places, I really want to dabble into transmedia, which means I can take a story and put it into other formats. And general audience is ideal for something like that. Now, I know some people would disagree with me on that front. However, I think a general audience is very important because that's where you're going to get your most appeal. A great example of this is Harry Potter. Harry Potter was originally written for young people. And when I say young people, I don't want to say young adult because young adult has transformed into like college and older ages. And it's just basically young, hormonally driven characters and engaging in hormonally driven conflict. Young adult used to be some like I mean Harry's what 12. That's what it used to be. Like the Chronicles of Narnia. It involved the PVC children who are young. Like that was the whole point, right? That's what it used to be. Um, it also appealed to other ages though. Um, that's where I think general audience storytelling, which is probably more leaning into the literary side of things, which is what really inspires me as an author. I'm not really inspired by trope and genre locked niche things. I enjoy epic format, which epic format is going to have a lot more involved than I think trope can limit. And that's probably why I struggle to pinpoint stuff. So, what I'm going to do today is we're going to talk about Nature Calls and why I think Nature Calls is relevant. I've tried coming up with a means of how people can relate to it now. I don't write to trope, but I definitely have genre elements that I can talk about. So I want to get into a little bit about that. So I guess right up the gate, I market Nature Calls as a modern fairy tale adventure story. Now, for some people, they will hear right in there, it says adventure. I don't say fantasy. I say adventure. Adventure is very in the moment. They're usually shorter stories. They stay current. Some people write them in first person. I can't read or write first person. It drives me up a wall. So the only way I could really do that is it has to be in the moment action, which people seem to love. But what makes a fairy tale a fairy tale? Now, fairy tales stem from folklore, which that's kind of some older stuff, right? That's why we hear fairy tales and we think they're older, archaic kind of storytelling. Grimm's fairy tale, which are retellings, by the way. Um, these are stories that usually they're born from folklore, which usually reflects like some societal, cultural values, lessons, things like that. Many of these cultures were animistic, being that they believed that animals, trees, things that aren't human, have a spirit or soul or something along those lines and should be given respect. Or nature worshiping, where you see nature as this divine entity and it needs to be revered, it needs to be protected, it needs to be respected. Or polytheistic, where you think that you see the divine in multiple facets versus just one. Another thing is that the values of these stories usually reflect the form of like a community based or the morality and life lessons of these cultures at their time. I say that in big emphasis, of their time. Um, this is one of the reasons why I think modern audiences, when or I say modern audiences in the term of people in this era, when they read a grim fairy tale, they go, "Oh my god, that's horrible," and I go, "If you lived back then, that might sound cool." Like if we were to tell these cultures about the Joker, they'd be horrified. That they think we would be these horribly cruel people. However, in today's modern ideology, they see the twistedness of humanity. Where I mean, horror. I mean, what we love about horror today is fairy tales and folklore to them back then. But that is a modern premise. Like, think about it. Edgar Allan Poe. This is all stuff that came from like Edwardian Victorian era ideology, and it's just evolved into now. So, something that distincts fairy tales from those things, though, is these are from a time when people saw something in nature that could not be explained. So they used storytelling to explain it. So that's a little background into fairy tales and folklore and what defines these things. Now, another element that I want to bring up is fae romance, which is very popular right now in the romance genres. I've seen plenty of stories about elves and humans being in love, or fairies falling in love with people, or I mean, some of this actually stems from mythology. I mean, let's look at people who fell in love with dryads and naiads, and oh wow, I feel like I just quoted Narnia. Oh, here we go. But before I rabbit hole, fae romance is a subgenre where an extraordinary element meets a mundane or ordinary element, and they come together in some kind of intimate dynamic. Now, typically, this is like two worlds coming together that have resulting conflict. The resulting conflict stems from the consequences of these two types of worlds coming together. That's the core being of fae romance. I would say, if we're going to try and make this simplified. It can be obvious romance, where it's lovey-dovey, kissy kissy smoochy, and the inciting eroticism, or it actually can encompass a type of reverence, where somebody loves something about nature and it gives them some type of fulfillment. I think the way that this becomes relatable, because these should be unrelatable to people, correct? But that the idea of two different people trying to find a means of balancing a relationship is a timeless conflict. It's a timeless story, right? So this is where I think in the modern fairy tale aspects, these are things that they should remain timeless, and you can tell these stories for years to come as a core story. And fae romance is in Nature Calls. It's something that I actually wanted to be a major focus, was the balance of nature and humanity, there has to be some kind of affection, some kind of intimacy, not necessarily romantic in nature, but where the two come together and there's touch. Um, that was something that I was trying to write. And again, this goes back to folk tales. They revered nature as intelligent. They revered it as alive. And if something is alive, then you can touch it, you can engage with it, and it engages back with you. So that's how, these two things are coming together. Now, when it comes to the modern part of this, I was looking into urban fantasy, which urban fantasy is super popular right now. I won't even lie. I've enjoyed some of it myself back when I was younger. But the urban fantasy is where you take, imaginary things and you bring them into the mundane world, right? So these stories usually are very action focused. I guess it's usually hidden magic in the real world is usually what it stems from. And these stories are going to have drama, comedy, tragedy, like all the big elements of fantasy are present in modern day. So you're going to be in a modern city, a modern town. Heck, you can be in Nature Calls setting. It's a country. It's like kind of like, not necessarily a country sticks kind of a place, but it's definitely a small town, which is ideal for engaging with preternatural beings. But in urban, oftentimes they involve conflicts, being caught between two worlds, but the two worlds do need to be present. An idea would be you've got like what is it? The Magicians. There we go. The Magicians. It was a book series and as well as a TV show. The world is present. It's there. It's in the world, but they have to hide it. Another example, Tales of Arcadia. There we go. Tales of Arcadia or Troll Hunters. The trolls are there. They're under the bridge, right? But they have to hide. And they have to adapt to the modern conflicts and means of getting food, right? So those are some examples of how urban fantasy is super popular, and people love it because they want some imaginative aspects in the real world. I think a lot of people are afraid that escapism leads to not being present in the real world, which I don't think that's the case. I think the escapism is supposed to take you away for a little while, and you come back with those little sparks of inspiration that move you forward. Stan Lee, one of my favorite quotes he ever said was he used to feel bad about being just a comic book artist when people were being doctors and lawyers and building bridges, and then he realized that without art, without film and story, those people would be really lost. They'd be sad. And I mean, if you don't have imagination, what inspires you to create? What inspires you to go back to work when you've had rough diagnoses and you've had to give bad news all day? That's what escapism does. It gives you that little bit of breathing room so that you can go back into your life. It doesn't have to be complete escapism where you don't come back. Another important aspect of urban fantasy that I do want to go over is that it usually involves a social element where you're having tradition clash with a modern take on morality or social norms, something along those lines. That is usually an important part of urban fantasy, which, again, I think is a really cool idea in a modern fairy tale telling. Is that, these fairy tales, remember, they come from folklore. This is a traditional viewpoint, and in a modern one, would you not be looking at these two worldviews coming into conflict with one another? I really do enjoy fleshing that out a lot, which comes to my last bit that I wanted to bring up, is the conflicting with nature. For people who remember in learning in literature, the different types of conflict, man versus nature, that's where you literally are up against a force of nature that is beyond you. It can be something as simple as you got stuck in a rainstorm that came out of nowhere, which ironically is how Nature Calls was born. Or it can be a natural disaster that just hit and left. One really interesting force of nature that I've always been fascinated by is kaiju. I mean, I lived in Japan as a kid for 2.5 years. I watched TV. I like kaiju. Are cool. I mean, who doesn't love Godzilla? Rah! You know, Mothra, all this stuff. So like that, there's nothing you can do in the face of Godzilla. There's nothing. There's no. Just let him go. That's all you can do. Case in point, he's not always a friend. Sometimes you've got Godzilla -1. So things to keep in mind with the man versus with this nature's element is it's usually the Fey realm can only be seen as a drastic force of nature to a normal world. Imagine if you suddenly had Titania, Queen of the Fairies, is teed off because, somebody moved in on their fairy court or messed up their fairy circle where like her main court comes to greet each other at the solstices and equinoxes. And somebody went and messed with the tree line. And she's like, excuse, and everybody's just going to be flipping out because they're just going to see this magical being and be like, what is that? What is that? Here we go. So yeah, there's no way in a modern fairy tale experience that Fae can be anything other than a force of nature. That what can you do? But I think it also can be a fascinating look at how the mysteries of this world that we will never fully understand, you can brush against them. You don't have to completely understand them to engage with them. So those are the four big points that I wanted to cover as far as like a background to understanding my take on a modern fairy tale. So how does this tie back to Nature Calls? Now, obviously, the old world coming into conflict with a fast-paced modern society. I actually have a family from a sense of the old world. The Dahl family are actually from a fishing village in northern Norway originally, and Papa Dahl got a job opportunity to where he could provide for Mama Dahl, and they were young at the time. He just gotten through school, and somebody was looking for somebody in his expertise. And so he moved with Mama Dahl and their oldest, who was a baby at the time, to South Dakota, Moonshine, South Dakota, for surveying in nature, because they were like, this is some really cool natural resources that we weren't familiar with, and this company's trying to move in on it. And so they're bringing their sense of the world into this more modern one. And one of my favorite things that I ever had Adrian do is, instead of buying a house, he had money for them to get a house. What he did was he bought a plot of land, because at the time when they moved there, this town was in development. They were just trying to get people to come to the community. So he bought a plot of land and then used the remaining money that he got as their like honeymoon money, or like when they got married, her parents gave them money, and he built her a house, like the dream house she would have had back in Norway. And like their family's big on their Viking heritage. Like they literally can trace their ancestry back to like the Dane of the area. Like that's their family. And like this old world coming into the modern one, when people come to their house, it feels like they're stepping into a different place. So it becomes this bridge between the world of nature, which, it's flora, rain, the other elements. They come here, it's familiar because this was a world they used to engage with. But it's also a place that the teenagers and their families, they come here and they're like, wow, this feels, it's old, but it's fascinating. Like they found a way to bring two worlds into one. And it's one of the reasons why the Dahl family, I feel it feels kind of like an elder role as far as like the stages of life. They're not old per se, like goodness gracious, Frisia's still young. Don't tell her she's old. She's very young. She's young. She's got 3 sons, but she's young. She's got a very mature outlook on life. She has a lot of wisdom that she shares with her neighbors, her friends that she's made here in Moonshine. And one of the cool parts is that she also represents a lot of traditional values. She's a strong female lead. Believe me, developing Fairytale was one of the most fun characters, human characters I had in the character development phase. She's spunky. She's wild. Like Adrian just sits back and just lets her go, and he falls in love with her every day. He falls all over again every day. They're in love. I was highly inspired by Gomez and Morticia, but take the morbid stuff out, basically. She manages that house like you wouldn't believe. Like, these are some of those older traditions in, like, how women were in the old world. Not from the perspective that I think a lot of people think they are, though. Because in actual traditional places, yeah, women were at home. They didn't have jobs, but they ran that house. The man went to work. He brought the money home and then handed the purse over to her. She ran that house. She made sure the bills were paid. She paid the bills. She made sure the kitchen was stocked. If they had staff, she was the one in charge of that. Like, that's where women actually, like, showed. So when you have this whole idea that I'm trying to show people is that you can have a strong woman who wants to be a mom. Like, this woman brews, like, hard cider and makes a side batch for the kids so the kids can have their cider, but then, like, the adults are in here going, like, dang, Frasier, you did it again. Like, this is some good shit. Like, she's a hostess. She doesn't have a gardener. She takes care of her own landscaping. That house looks amazing because of all the time she puts into it, so that when her husband comes home, it's a great place for them to engage with each other. Their kids are entertained. Like, it's just a welcoming, warm place to be, which does come into conflict with another mother, ironically. Like I said, there's a clashing of tradition versus modern. But it's not that I'm trying to say one is worse than the other or better than the other. I'm just trying to show two worldviews. Remember, two worlds, right? Two worlds clashing. Another thing is how Nature Calls talks about how community is reflected in how nature networks with each other. For people who aren't aware, trees talk to each other. Actually, when I was in my early days of my my pagan study, I remembered a druid told me that the trees are the oldest network in the world. They talk to each other, and if you really want to know how one of your family members is doing, ask the trees, and they'll ask their tree friends for you and give information back. Or if you want to send well wishes to a loved one that you're not near, give your concerns and speak to the tree and tell them how much you care about this family member and how much you want them to know that. And they believed that the trees would send your well wishes for you. I think I even read somewhere on the internet the Wood World Web. I was like, well, that's a clever way to describe tree networking. There actually is scientific evidence that trees do talk to each other. Forests, the roots actually have certain chemicals that they release into the soil, which they can tell other trees, oh, this one's sick, this one's dying, or we're in a drought, guys, so we need to be more conservative with what we're drinking and things like that. So trees have their own sense of community where they look out for each other, they take care of one another. They even have a bit where when a tree dies, you ever wonder why it just falls over and it doesn't stay upright? Because when it's gone, it's gone. So they no longer need to keep it in the ground. So it falls over and it decays and becomes part of the forest. So there's a cycle there. Another aspect is animal packs and herds. It's reflective of human community. Remember what I was mentioning, how folk tales are describing things that they saw around them. There is a theory out there that humanity actually took a lot of influence on how to make a community or make a pack or a tribe or something like that off of looking at animals, how they engaged with each other, how they took care of each other. I mean, everybody's probably familiar with like the origin of dogs, how wolves decided to leave and join them and take care of them. Um, in animism, they believed that not only that, but wolves taught them how to have community, how to have leadership, how to have that structure in the tribe. Um, which honestly, like the more this again goes back to my early pagan study. Um, this is where I'm like, I find it fascinating for a writer's perspective when you look at how like story has evolved, not just from just literature, but how storytelling is a part of human nature, the human condition, and the human story. We orally used to pass down fairy tales so that the next generation would know of it. And the intimacy of the elders telling the children so that the children would grow and then as adults would see how these stories were important, why they were important, so that when they're in their elder years, they tell the children and it continuously moves forward in that fashion. Um, I think that in a modern fairy tale, we've kind of lost a lot of oral traditions. And I think that if you take a modern fairy tale, like if you really want it to be a fairy tale, I'm not talking about Disney. I'm not talking about DreamWorks. I'm not talking about these retellings that people are just taking a story from the Grimm Tales or something along those lines and they're retelling it. I'm talking about a new fairy tale. I think that this can be an example of how we bring some of those oral traditions and we put them into a story. The story then becomes part of fandom. The readers and the audience who enjoy them share these stories. They talk about these stories and they become a part of the community again. That I think is where a modern fairy tale can really shine. Um, Another aspect with the fairy romance. Remember how I mentioned it doesn't necessarily have to be that traditional erotic fair romance. There's there's an intimacy that humanity has with nature that some people are they're getting back into it. You've probably heard of nature bathing, where you go out into the woods or you go out into a garden or some kind of a park and you just spend time in the silence. You just let the natural beauty, everything happening around you just happen to you and you just let it wash over you. One of the reasons why this is significant is because we do have a symbiotic relationship with nature. Trees feed on our carbon dioxide. That is their air. And then they breathe out oxygen to us. This relationship is integral. There's a reason why we need trees. For some of us millennials, we remember in the 90s, everybody was talking about plant a tree, plant a tree, plant a tree. Yes, plant a tree, because you never know. That could be the best friend you could possibly have. One of the reasons why nature calls became such an integral story around trees, I mean, aside from the fact that at the time when I was developing this, I quite literally, if I couldn't stand being in my house at the time because it was very turbulent, I would go and sit under this tree behind my mother's townhouse. And I would just sit there. I would lean against the trunk, I would deep breathe, and I would just vent. As if the tree was listening to me. And honestly, I felt better. There was a presence I felt from the tree. And I don't know if it's just because I needed to feel that, or maybe I was genuinely feeling comfort. Who knows? But the intimacy, but where you reach out to nature and it reaches back, that's something that I do have in the nature call story. One of the big names that I normally try to talk about is I do have like legitimate fairy romance happening in Nature Calls. Nature Calls is a coming of age story. One of the aspects of coming of age is falling in love. Like learning about how to love another person. That struggle of you're young and you're figuring out who you are as a person, but how do you as a person connect to another person? Like these are huge things that people go through in their teenage years. And I remember I wouldn't have navigated it the way I did if I didn't have my dad. So I felt like this is like something that I really wanted to touch on, because nature, remember, nature does teach us, but nature also is reaching out to us. And in this regard, Leif and Gust. I can't really, there's nothing hidden on that one. It's kind of obvious, and it's one of the more famous things about nature calls. It's from book one, is that Gust is fascinated with humans, especially creatives and artists. And by artists, I mean any kind of a creative, be it actual art, be it sculpting, be it dancing, be it singing. The arts. Gust is drawn to the arts. He loves seeing how humans get inspired to do things and create. He's drawn to these kinds of humans. And Leif, he has a gorgeous voice, and he loves listening to Leif's voice. Leif, on the other hand, Leif has literally been in love with fairies since he was a little kid. Like, he loves fairy tales. His mother's been telling them from the old world forever. He's always wanting to hear a new one. Hell, he'll listen to a new one. Like, the old ones, new ones, just tell him a story. He loves fairy tales. Peter Pan was his favorite Disney movie as a kid. His parents took him to see the play. He was fascinated by the concept of fairies and fairy circles and like all fairy lore, because he sees the sentience of nature, and for him it comes in the form of fairies, and he's longing to reach out and engage with fairies. He probably fantasizes a lot about going to Neverland. I know when I was a kid, I sat on my windowsill and tried to find the second star to the right straight on the morning. I also really enjoyed the idea of portal fantasy, like where I could go to a completely other place, than where I was. Not necessarily because I was running away yet, but as a child, yeah, I was fascinated with the concept of Neverland, going someplace so fantastical. That is Leif. So when he meets Gust, and Gust is like, I want to see your dreams. I want to see your creativity. I want to see what freedom drives you. Where are you breaking boundaries? Where are you breaking away from the norm? Whereas Leif is over here like, does Neverland exist? And his answer that he gets is no. But there is a place where people like I am exists. And it becomes the object of Leif's character arc. He wants to go see Buyan. He wants to see the Island of the Wind. And that actually comes from a Slavic folklore. I actually referenced the actual folklore that Buyan is based on in the books, in book one. I bring that up, and that particular folktale happens to have some parallels in the storyline. It's not necessarily the same story, but I do try to do nods back to that story because it's not really a tale that gets told a lot. I think a lot of people are really wrapped up in the Grimm fairy tale, so they don't know a lot about other cultures and their fairy tales. But I also have other fae romance in that I have two types of fairies that are coming together, because the way I embody these preternatural characters is they are embodiments of their element. So they are not the element per se, but they are born from this element. One of them being flowers or plant life loves the rain. People probably do remember, I need you like the flower needs the rain, you know I need you. That metaphor, everybody knows it, right? So obviously it's in the book, but I personified it so that you can see it. Another being how the earth loves the sky. Like, these dynamics of these two different like forces and how they engage with each other intimately. That's how I was personifying these fairies, or at least my fae. But you also see how like I said, nature reaching out to humanity. There are some examples of that. I won't get too deep into that one because I want you guys to enjoy some aspects of nature calls. But I do have fairy romance, and some, yeah, actual romance, and some is more on the lines of other forms of love. Um, so I really enjoy dabbling in that a lot. And then, of course, nature is this primordial force of nature, right? It's been around way before us, and it'll most likely be here probably after us. um, but something to keep in mind when it comes to nature calls is that the planet has been putting up with some BS from space longer than us. We'd go, oh my god, we're having a meteor is coming toward Earth. And on Bouillon, they're like, oh, right on schedule. Because they're familiar with the intricate workings that space has. They've seen it. I know I bring up the big conflict that comes into play that the humans don't realize is coming is something that nature has been dealing with. So you get to see that the inhabitants of Bouillon have been dealing with a struggle all their own, that because humans haven't been around quite as long, or maybe because they haven't passed down the stories as well as they used to, they're not familiar with what's coming. And maybe if they'd paid attention, they'd be more aware. So whereas as I mentioned, nature reaching out to us, like if we're listening, it will tell us. If we pay attention to the signs, nature speaks. So if we pay attention, or, and as I like to say, if we answer the call, there is much to be learned. You won't learn everything. We will never know everything, which I think is a really cool aspect of life, though. We're not supposed to figure everything out, but we're supposed to want to understand it. We're supposed to want to seek it out. We're supposed to be curious. I mean, we're designed to be that way. But I think that one of the cool parts of nature calls is, even Jamie says, there's just some things that we're not supposed to understand, and that's okay. And I think for young people, because of how scary life is, I think that's one of the reasons why Jamie resonates with a lot of young people. I remember there was a comment that I got on Inkit where they were like, I want Jamie to be my best friend. Because Jamie doesn't play games. She's honest, but she's not cruel. She's, I mean, yeah, she struggles with depression, but what kid wouldn't when you've seen the harsher realities of life young? So yeah, she doesn't have the same rose-tinted glasses that a lot of her peers have. She sees how life can really bring a person down. She understands that life is a struggle. But what Jamie is seeking is, okay, so I know how rough life is. How do I find the spark again? Where do I find the wonder? Because all she sees is that life moves forward and then you die. That's how Jamie sees life, and that's kind of boring. There's no reason to keep going, aside from the fact that she has people who care about her in it that she wants to stick around to see. But when she meets Flora, she starts to see a part of the world that she never understood before. And there is that spark. There is that wonder that's left in the world. The old world reaching out to the new one. It's not trying to replace it. It's not trying to dethrone it. It's just trying to coexist. And I think that's a big part of the story is, can two things exist at the same time? Statistically speaking, yes. Yes, they can. It's okay. Not everybody's going to agree with you. Not everybody's going to like you. That was a harsh reality I had to accept as a kid. But it's something that when you're young, when you understand that resiliency that you need in adulthood, it's something that'll get you through things a lot easier. Nature Calls is supposed to be a story about coming of age to encourage young people, but it also is reflective for older readers who remember that inner child of like, wow, I remember being young. I remember how hard this was. And you kind of want to see where their journey goes. It's one of the things that I do know some of the elders in my life. They say that it's hard watching the young, but at the same time, you can't not watch because you want to see where they end up. You want to see if they make it through. You want to see how they overcome. So I think that the story of Nature Calls, because it does have parents, grandparents, mentors that are watching young people go through life. And they know, okay, I'm here if you need me, but I can't fix it. You have to figure it out. And when these kids figure it out, they can't help but be proud. And that's like might be one of the reasons why older readers enjoy it, because they're like, I'm proud. I'm proud of Jamie. I'm proud of Jake. I'm proud of Leif. I'm proud of Chelsea. Heck, proud of Flora, because Flora is not without her own story arc. So, yeah, like I said, modern fairy tale. It's got plenty of traditional stuff going on. It's got the conflict of tradition versus modern, and can these two things exist? It also has romantic elements, which are actually an integral part of the plot line. We have that urban setting for that modern take on a traditional kind of story. And you also have the conflict with nature, which is, from what I understand and everything I was reading, I thought it was really cool because they were like, yeah, this is probably the most compelling conflict in literature. And I thought, well, maybe that's why fairy tales are so endearing. Maybe that's why they stand the test of time. Maybe that's why fairies and folklore and all these things never really go away. So that's me talking about Nature Calls today. um, Currently, Nature Calls Spring is published. It's available Amazon, Barnes & Noble online, but you can also get a physical copy from Feywild Apothecary, which is Mrs. Winchester's business, feywildapothecary.com shop. All of those books are always signed, so you don't have to buy one of my signature stickers that I do sell on my coffee page, J. Allen Wynn. Yeah, if you're interested in checking out a story like that, I am in the middle of crowdfunding for getting Summer published, which a lot of people did say that Spring was kind of a slower burn, even though it was pretty quick. Takes place over a course of a week, I think. But Summer, I mean, isn't that the seasons though? Spring is the thaw from the winter, and then summer is where, it's all that energy from the warmth. The seasons and cycles of life is kind of the core of Nature Calls, I suppose you could say. That's the core values of the story, and is a timeless story. So if you want to help support Summer getting published, once I have more moving forward funding wise, the crowdfund is on my coffee page. I do want to have it published and have it sitting on a shelf next to Spring. Autumn is technically, I wrote the ending, so I know how that story goes. It's kind of technically still in a manuscript phase, because based on how beta reading and alpha reading for Summer goes, I did end up revisiting Summer recently. I was supposed to try and have it proofread, but the person who was proofreading it wanted me to do a little bit more work on it. I did not get any beta readers for it because nobody was really interested, but I do want to open it up for beta reading, but I don't also want to keep people hanging, waiting on the book to come out. So once I've got the financial goal move forward more, and I'm talking with Palmetto Publishing, my publisher, then I'll be more interested once we get closer to that to open up for betas, because like I said, I don't want to keep anybody hanging, waiting on their benefits from being a beta. But Autumn, I do know where that one goes, and then Winter will be the final installment of the main book Um, I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing like spin-offs or short stories that tie in between, because believe me, there's plenty I couldn't put in the book. Trying to stay in the moment. Um, but yeah, that was me discussing my series Nature Calls. I really would love to see this move forward some more. I am working on making some book merchandise to go with it. Um, I've got some book swag that I've been working on since like November or December. Trying to see if I can get that moving forward a little bit more. More to come from that. Keep your eyes on my coffee page, because I do have a shop over there where some lesser expensive stuff. I do know Mrs. Winchester wants to try and make some jewelry for this one as well. Um, so yeah, just keep your eyes on my socials. I'm gonna try and be more present on YouTube. There might be maybe one two big videos, and then I'm gonna try and get back into doing my Wednesday videos. It's just been the day job. I literally was doing 7 day a week trying to get that room built. Because if you don't see any of my previous stuff, I work in an escape room at my day job. We built a tent pop-up room in 2 months, and it's been trying to get it running and make our money back. Oh my god, I was exhausted. I'm still recovering from that, but yeah, it was a fun experience. I don't regret seeing that room come together. It's a gorgeous room. If you're in Virginia Beach, we're gonna have it through the end of February. Finding Frosty Holly Jolly Christmas Caper at Black Hat Escape Room. Um, Definitely should check that out if you're in the area. But in the meantime, though, as far as Jay Allen goes, yeah, check out Spring. You can see previews of it on my Inkit profile, Jay Allen Winchester. There's obviously the previews on Amazon. It gives you a little snippet of what the ebook looks like. I do have the audio edition that I read the whole book on my Spotify podcast, Hearth of a Writer. That one it is a subscription, but obviously that one goes towards supporting the books and me and all that stuff. $4.99 a month for everything. I'm on my third book in that one, which we are just now getting back to. Like I said, it was 2 months of craziness, and I had a plot hole that nobody told me about on Inkit. But we fixed it, so that one's back. Working on making some newer free content for you guys, since my friend and I, who normally do the author roasts, don't really have an aligning schedule as of late. So yeah, working on some stuff moving forward. It's kind of slowly coming together though, because like I said, I am still recovering from 2 months of craziness. But yeah, I'm excited to see where 2025 goes. I would like to see us get summer, at least get the funding together to get that started by the end of the year. If not, maybe by the end of the year. That'd be fun. Or maybe we make each publishing be Nature Calls Day, which we just had back here on the 17th. So yeah, I would love to see what you think of Nature Calls, what you think of the video. Like I said, I was trying to do a scripted video. I'm not good at this stuff. My brain literally stems off into a million different directions whenever I talk about something. So I tried doing a script. See where that went. Yeah, I've already done a really long video, so I will stop boring you. For those of you who got to the very end, thank you for watching. Let me know what you thought. If you really want to see where I'm going, obviously subscribe to the channel, share it. Please tell me what you thought, though. Feedback is my stardust, as I always say. And as always, I always like to give my blessing of be kind to yourself and others as we all transverse the path of life. It goes in the same direction, we just take different vehicles. But happy reading and listening. Until next time, adventurers.